All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, good
Hey,
afternoon.
good afternoon.
I'm trying to get some light in my camera. See if that works. All right. Well, welcome to noon on Monday. We're halfway there in the day, hopefully. Let's get started. We're going to try to see if we can get this meeting done within the hour. So welcome. I think we have Director Wiener and myself. So we have the two directors that we need, and I believe we have all the staff. Justin, is everybody that needs to be here?
Yes, everybody's here.
Perfect. Then I guess we need to take a roll for the
Okay.
purpose of this. So Ms. Martinez, take it away.
Okay, Vice President Cepeda
Here.
and Director Wiener.
Present.
Thank you.
Present.
Next item is public comment for items not on the agenda. And I did not receive any public comment for any items.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Then with that, we can move right along to our agenda. I guess we have the first item.
So we are, we have a brief presentation on an item that we will be bringing to the board either at this next meeting in February or at the next meeting early March. So we wanted to get this in front of you, and this is an item on several proposed changes to staffing, and it includes a combination of title changes, some position eliminations, where we're adding a different position that we think is a better fit for what our needs are. And then a bit of a reorganization in our infrastructure and planning department. So with that, Justin, I think is going to start off the presentation, and then Lynette, and I wanted to just make sure, has everyone met Lynette Hart, our new HR manager, before we get started?
Okay. Yeah. Welcome, Lynette. Welcome.
Um,
I was wondering, I'm like, maybe that was a legal advisor or somebody.
Yeah, it just occurred to me with Zoom and people not in the office that it's possible we have people starting, and I've actually never met Lynette in person either. So anyway, so I think Justin's going to hand it off, and then Lynette is also going to be presenting, and then Michael will be presenting as well as myself at one point. So yeah, that's sort of the intro, and with that we can get started.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon. I'm just going to start off with and introduce our item. Lisa gave us an introduction on what we're looking to do with proposed position modifications, and then we'll have Lynette will give a brief presentation on one area, and then we'll share between myself, Lisa, and Michael about what we're proposing to do. So so what we're looking in just holistically as part of the whole organization, as department managers, we've been looking at, do we have the right titles? Do we have the right structure within all of our departments? And so so today we're proposing several different changes that would help with the really the kind of the structure of the organization. Part of that is title changes. We're making recommendations about changing the department manager titles to director, the supervisors to managers, changing administrative analyst to management analyst. And we're looking at making several position changes in the office of general manager, position change in administrative services, and a reorganization within the infrastructure and planning department. So we'll be going through each of these three different items. Today we'll start off, and I'll just pass it over to Lynette, and then so she can discuss about a reasoning why we are proposing making these title changes and how that would impact the organization. So Lynette, I do have control of the slides, and so you can just let me know when you're ready to go to the next one.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Pass over to Lynette, our human resources manager.
Okay, so thank you. So the background is we have quite a few of our classification titles need to be changed because they're not really aligned with the class specs. So the duties and responsibilities of the positions are not matching the titles that the employees are currently classified under. The manager titles as currently used are not typically industry standard. Based on the study of comparable water districts, classifications with similar duties, knowledge, skills, and abilities and qualifications fall within the scope of being a director. Modifying the classification titles of these identified classifications will align with internal and external equity and properly classify the roles to appropriately manage outreach for the position should we need to do so, and retention. The appropriate titles and scopes will clarify roles and responsibilities within the organization. And at this time, we currently have 9 managers, which the mistitling is blurring the lines of whom is actually directing the department, who is responsible for the department budget, project delivery, hiring, and discipline of staff, and setting strategic direction. The differences between a director and a manager are these. Directors create, plan, scope of work, strategy, develop the budget, and report directly to the general manager, while managers make sure the plan is being followed by managing and supervising assigned personnel. They interpret the plan, they measure the work performed, assist with managing the budget, and report progress or issues to the director. And then finally, directors also have subordinate managers and supervisors as direct reports. Okay, Justin, you can go to the next slide. So as you can see from this slide, the title changes here are for our department heads. So we have Director of Administrative Services, which is currently titled as Administrative Services Department Manager. We will have a Director of Infrastructure and Planning, which is currently titled as Infrastructure and Planning Department Manager, and Director of Water Quality and Resource Recovery, which is currently titled at Water Quality and Resource Recovery. Next, please. And for our supervisor to manager roles, we're changing the we're creating a finance manager title, which is currently titled at finance supervisor, the laboratory manager, which is currently titled at laboratory supervisor, and then a collection system manager, which is currently a collection system supervisor. Next title, please. And for our administrative class that we have, the classes we have, we're changing to
Lynette, can I
Ma'am?
ask you to go back for a second?
yes, ma'am.
Because those are only an example. Those are not all of
Yes,
the positions.
thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I just want to advise you that obviously because we have time and we don't want to go through all of the titles. This is just a sample for each of the different groups that the title changes are going to be made, but this will be collectively throughout the district. Okay, so for administrative analyst to management analyst, as you'll see, the series currently is Administrative Analyst 1, Administrative Analyst 2, and Administrative Analyst 3. We will be changing, we're proposing to change those titles to Assistant Management Analyst, Associate Management Analyst, and Senior Management Analyst. Next slide, please. So the current structure of the general manager's office, as you see it in front of you, is the general manager, and her direct reports are the communications manager, executive assistant, the deputy general manager, and a health and safety coordinator manager. The new structure will be as follows as proposed. The general manager will now have that department has 2 new reports, and they will either be an assistant or associate management analyst that will be assigned to the general manager and the deputy general manager, as you can see right there.
So I'm going to talk just briefly about why we're proposing some of the changes that we're proposing. So in the Office of the General Manager, as Lynette mentioned, we currently have two positions that were created. One was the executive assistant, the other was a communications manager. The communications manager was a position that some prior board members had requested. It wasn't necessarily a position that staff agreed with or thought was the best use of district resources. We felt we would be better served by having a consultant do the work, where a consultant could have the full complement of duties. No one person in the communications position could really fill all of the different duties and responsibilities that we need to really present the things that you've seen rolling out on the communication side. So we felt that it would be better to have a firm that could do that, which is why we went out for an RFP, selected a firm, and that's the work you've been seeing. If we had a communications manager, they would essentially only really be able to be a coordinator of that work. And so that's a very high level position to do very limited work. So we feel that that work would be better served by having an analyst. And the way in which it would work is that I'm proposing that we eliminate the executive assistant and eliminate the communications manager position, because as we've also transitioned and things have changed, we also are realizing that the executive assistant is probably not as necessary. And it was very focused on clerical and not as much on being able to do some of the other duties that we feel are more important to support the district overall, which is some of the planning, reporting out on things like the strategic plan, other initiatives. One of the things that we would be looking to have with the analyst is being able to take over some of the social media posts that we currently have our consultant doing. So we would be able to shift some of that specialized communications work to an analyst. So they could do the media posts, they could update the website, they could do probably some of the newsletter work, and then we would keep our consultant for sort of that higher level, more specialized work. The other thing that the analyst would be doing, as I mentioned, is some of the reporting. Right now, we're working very hard to get our reporting in place because we haven't had a lot of reporting out on the different initiatives. And that is another thing that we are looking for the analyst to do. The second analyst that we're proposing to add would be assigned to the deputy general manager, and that person would help with a lot of the new initiatives that we didn't previously have, like the horizontal levy, like the energy project, like the external agreements that we have to address, asset management project. So we're finding a need for the deputy to also have some support that is not just on the administrative side, but can do some of that research, can do some of the writing, can take the lead on some of the projects. So those are the two changes in the Office of the General Manager. Justin will show you the cost difference of eliminating those two positions and swapping them out with the analyst position. The other thing is that we believe there's a possibility that one of the positions could be filled internally, which would be great. And this also is an opportunity for someone in these roles to work with the general manager and the deputy general manager and have the ability to get trained and really have a lot of exposure to different areas of the organization and put them in a position to also be able to advance throughout the organization with that experience. So those are the changes in the Office of the General Manager.
I'll go ahead and jump into the changes that we're proposing for administrative services. So this is the current organization chart with administrative services, how we're structured. We don't have a very deep hierarchy here. It's essentially myself, and then we have several of our HR manager and analyst positions in here. So beside the title changes, what I am proposing is we have a vacant procurement specialist. The position retired a little over about a year ago. And so what I am proposing is that we change the procurement specialist into a financial analyst role. The financial analyst is going to be somebody who's going to be really focused on our budget development. That they will also be, this person would also be working very closely on our financial forecast. And as we're moving forward, it's a critical position for the organization to make sure that we have one central person who's monitoring our budget and our finances. This would be part of the finance division. We've just over the last year and a half since I've been working with the West County Wastewater, I've really seen that a lot of the budget related work has fallen on to my position. And I think with the scope of duties that I have, it makes a lot more sense to have one person who's able to focus on the budget, work with other departments related to budget issues, making sure that our financial system is set up appropriately, working with the current finance supervisor, but the retitled finance manager, just to coordinate all of our financial transactions and just to make sure that we have the right reporting so we can more easily track and report out all of our financial activities to the board, as well as have better, make it easier for staff to be able to see what's going on with our expenses and revenues within the organization. What we found on the procurement specialist position, it found just we don't have the volume I would think that would need to justify a specific of procurement to have one person doing just procurement. And we also found that person worked a lot on contract management, which since the position has been vacant, a lot of the contract management has been shifted to our analyst positions. And so I think that's where contract coordination, overseeing consultants fits better within the analyst series of a position rather than within a standalone procurement specialist. And so that's all the changes I'm proposing to make with administrative services. We're moving on. I'll pass this on to Michael, because he can discuss the changes that he is proposing to make within infrastructure and planning.
Thank you, and good afternoon. In infrastructure and planning, as you see it exists here, there are essentially three divisions, as well as administrative positions. That's the capital programs division, the planning and support services, the collection systems, and then there are three administrative positions in the department. The department is tasked with managing, constructing, and general oversight of the wellness of our collection system, our GIS system, and a number of other areas of work. Currently, the body of work is being managed and completed by the current staff, but there are some areas where we can improve in order to be more efficient and effective in the department. Can you go to the next slide, Justin? So the proposed changes in the department would be to titles in blue. So the capital program manager will become a capital portfolio manager. Essentially, that is aligning the title with the actual duties, because the position is really managing a portfolio of projects, of programs. And to make that more clear, a project is essentially one project that has a start and end date and delivers a unique product, and it is a temporary endeavor. And then you have a program, which usually is a collective of like projects. And then you have a portfolio, which is a collective of programs, which are not necessarily identical or similar, but they serve the same organizational need, essentially. So the position the name change would better align with the work that the position is doing. The planning and support supervisor would turn into a manager, there is a need for some additional administrative support in a department, which is why I'm requesting the senior management analyst. This position would pick up a lot of the tasks that don't have a specific home in the organization currently. So, for instance, when the board made a decision or adopted the goal of going carbon negative by 2032, that had to land somewhere. And it landed in IMP without a specific employee assigned to it. What it ended up doing, and tasks like that end up doing, is derailing some of the other work that we're doing. And what we're looking for in this position is someone who can go and do the work of analyzing that assignment, figuring out what does that even mean, research, what does carbon negative mean, and how do we develop a plan to get there? And that body of work was done in IMP by a consultant. And as we're moving away from hiring or having temporary and contract staff in the organization as much, we need someone who can pick up those bodies of work, do the independent analysis and assessment, and put together a plan for how we execute on some of these things. They won't necessarily be the person who has to execute, but they are the person who's going to figure out how we execute and help us develop a plan on that stuff. The associate management analyst is a title change, same duties, but aligning with the work that's currently being done. And then you have the collection systems manager, which is a title change, but also a bit of a new position. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the current structure in planning and support services is in front of you. And just a little bit of background I'd like to give you before we dig into the divisions and what they do. As you are likely well aware of, our district has 250 miles of gravity pipe. We have about 6 miles of pressurized pipe that we call force mains. We have roughly 5,000 manholes and 17 lift stations in the organization. That equates to about 34,000 residents. I think we have slightly over 2,000 commercial and industrial businesses that all have laterals that connect to our system. The Planning and Support Services Division is responsible for the compliance of all of those laterals, the planning, a portion of the assessment work, but also the planning work as it relates to our capital projects and improvements to our system to serve all of these residents, the inspections of laterals, the handling of our GIS map, and just a little bit about GIS. So our geographic, why am I spacing on it? Our GIS, and I'll get back to what that actually means.
Geographic Information System.
There you go. Thank you. So we use the system. It's essentially a database where we house our all of our infrastructure information, and that could be pipe lengths, pipe type, pipe depth, pipe age, manhole depth, manhole size, those sort of things. And we have a database set up, but that database is essentially to be used as our a source of all of our information and a holding of our information. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be complete. It needs to be accessible. And the current system that we have is not that. But this division is responsible for maintaining that. This division is also responsible for helping in the planning of capital projects, as well as lateral assessments, creating permits, that sort of thing. Can you go to the next slide, please? So currently under the Infrastructure and Planning Department, you have the Planning and Support Services Manager, the District Inspector, and 2 engineers. And the proposal here is to create a GIS Program Manager position. Historically in the organization, our GIS program has been managed by staff that were in a position that was not specifically set up, requesting or requiring the appropriate skill set to manage such an important asset. And the staff that we had in the position took it on because they had an interest in it, not necessarily because they were appropriate people to do the work. So what we're requesting here is to develop a specification and hire a position specifically with the intent of managing a geographic information system, as opposed to having someone with a different skill set do the best they can at it. So the proposed position here would provide us with the ability to have an accurate, complete GIS system, which would then provide us with the information to more effectively manage, maintain, and plan our system. Currently, and one of the drawbacks to having the system that is not accurate and is not complete is that you have overruns in terms of projects. You end up with change orders for things that have inaccurate information. For instance, if you go in GIS and it says a manhole is 5 feet deep and you get an estimate from a contractor for a 5 foot deep manhole replacement, and you get in the field and the manhole is actually 17 feet deep, you have a pretty sizable change order. And if that happens on a large enough project, you have some pretty big cost overruns on that project. The same thing if you have a GIS system that says a manhole is located at the corner of a certain block and the manhole is not there, it's actually halfway up the block, and you send a crew out to maintain that manhole, they waste several hours trying to find the manhole in order to get into the manhole to maintain the system. The same happens when you can't locate manholes and you have backups in residents' homes, and you need to be able to go to the manhole that's upstream or downstream of that backup in order to clear the backup. And you spend hours looking for a manhole in the dark that's supposed to be located at the corner of Silver, but it's actually not. So those things we will be improving by creating this position, developing a more comprehensive and accurate GIS program. Next slide, please. The current structure of the capital program division is the capital program manager. There are 4 positions that report to that position. One is an engineer. You have 3 project managers at different levels. There's the project manager, the senior project manager, and then we have a project manager that's a limited term position. Excuse me, next slide, please. The only change that we are recommending in the capital program division is a title change to the capital program manager to create the capital portfolio manager. And as I described before, that is to more appropriately title the position consistent with the work that's being done. Next slide, please. The current structure of the collection system division. You have and I know that this is hard to read. Cesar, I'll explain, Director Zepeda, I'll explain it. And you don't have to strain your eyes, but you're more than welcome to try to see it. But essentially what you have at the top is you have the collection system supervisor, and then you have 12 direct reports to the collection system supervisor. You have currently 5 lead crew members, and then you have 7 crew members. The collection system division is responsible for the cleaning, maintenance, and small repairs of our collection system. So whenever there is a line that needs to be cleaned, a manhole that needs to be raised or lowered, small pipe patches that need to be done, an emergency, a resident calls in, there's an overflow in the street or it's backing up at their home, the collection system is who gets called. And Director Zepeda, I'm so happy that you were straining your eyes to look at the screen, because I think that is a lot of what the collection system supervisor has to do with 12 direct reports. You have to stretch yourself really thin and really, you don't get to give the level of oversight to the division that you really need to, and you get caught up in individual tasks and you get sort of funnel vision trying to figure out one thing. So can we go to the next slide, please? That therein lies the reason for the changes that are being recommended here. So the recommendation here is to create essentially 3 new positions. One is to change the collection system supervisor position to a collection system manager. So in one regard, it is consistent with the other changes to all of the other supervisory titles. The other piece of it is there's some additional, more programmatic responsibilities that will be assigned to this position that will have to do with planning forward and technology advancements and just the overall alignment of the tasks in the collection system division to the departmental and organization's goals. The collection system field supervisors, which are the next position down that are being created, will take on some of the current supervisory responsibilities of the collection system manager, not all of them, but some of them. And what I want to explain first is that this is not a desk job. The field supervisor will spend about 15 to 25% of their time doing scheduling and planning the daily work of the staff members that report to them. The rest of their time will be in the field working as they do now. You'll notice that there are 2 new positions, but there's only 1 FTE being added from the previous slide. The reason for that is we currently have a vacancy from someone who retired as the collections lead collection system. I think it's a crew member too. And the recommendation here is to take that position and convert it into a field supervisor. The other position is to create the second collection system field supervisor position. The reason we are requesting to add an FTE here is so that we have the flexibility to get the appropriate person into or people into the organization. We don't have 2 vacant positions, we have 1 vacant position. So we're looking to convert that position and requesting an additional position to hire for the second collection system field supervisor position. And I can hear someone thinking, can't we fill those with our current staff? And it's possible, but what we don't want to do is be boxed into a corner where we have to fill the position with someone who may not actually be the appropriate fit. It would be great for us to find folks internally to fill these positions and then backfill the positions that they vacate. But we can't plan that way. We have to plan as if we don't have anyone internally. We have to be fair. We have to be forthcoming about the fact that we're going to do a recruitment, and we encourage and support our internal candidates in applying for these positions and hopefully getting one, if not both of these positions. And then, like I said, we could backfill. And if we were to do that, we would likely not need the additional position, but we need to plan as if we need it for these purposes. These collection system field supervisors would, like I said, take off some of the planning and daily planning work from the collection system supervisor that's turning into a manager now, so that they could have a better span of control in the department. And that is essentially these changes. Next slide, please. I don't know that there's another one for IMP. There isn't.
Yeah, that's actually the end of for IMP. I'll take over these next several slides to talk about the cost and what this would, the fiscal impact of these changes. So looking at the Office of the General Manager, so I've listed in this chart the positions that are going to be removed, their associated costs. This is an annual cost of the position, and then adding adding back the 2 FTEs. So if we're looking at the Office of the General Manager, remove an executive assistant and communications manager, and then we add either the associate management analyst, our net cost is a reduction of $45,000 per year for those positions. So we're actually saving just a little bit of money by making that change. So there's no changes in the FTE count for the Office of the General Manager. On administrative services. So showing you all the different title changes that we're also proposing here. There's no cost on making the title changes. We're just changing the title. We're not going to need to change the salary associated with that. With the procurement specialist, we'll be reducing by $181,000. Financial analyst is slightly more per year, so $214,000. So the net change within administrative services per year would be an additional $33,000, and there's no change in the position count department. Within infrastructure and planning, there's quite a few more changes that are going on. It's a larger reorganization. So there's several title changes. We'll be removing an administrative technician, adding a senior management analyst, adding a GIS program manager, adding a collection system. Well, the manager is still there. It's just we're changing some of the specifications, but that position would have an associated cost cost increase, and as well as the the field supervisors, and then remove 1 FTE of the crew member, as Michael was just talking about. So that net change by adding 2 additional FTEs within the infrastructure and planning department would cost an extra $600 and $2,000 per year. And so then just so you can see all the position title changes that we're proposing that go into the Water Quality and Resource Recovery Department. So this the Director of Water Quality and Resource Recovery, and you can see the 4 managers that will have title changes to them. So just in summary, if you can see what the total change and the impact, the fiscal impact for all these proposed changes, is that we'd be adding 2 FTEs within the organization, and that would be a net cost of $590,000 per fiscal year. And so just kind of our next steps, we're happy to answer questions in just a minute, but it's what we would be going back to the board in probably the first meeting in March would be to get approval of the new job classifications. So that would be the positions like the GIS manager, the GIS program manager, the classification, the changes for the collection system manager, adding the collection system field supervisor, as well as the financial analyst would need those job classifications. And then we would also have an updated position control list that the board would need to approve, as well as an adopted a new wage schedule. And so those would be the actions for the future. And then once that would be approved, if those are all approved by the board, then we'd be able to recruit for these positions. So that ends our presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
One thing I wanted to clarify before the questions, because I'm not sure if it was clear, all of the positions that are being recommended for elimination are all vacant positions. So there's nobody impacted by any of the position changes that are filled. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Great, thank you, Justin, for that, and everyone involved in the presentation. Thank you. Director Reeder, I want to pass it over to you to see if you have any questions.
Yes. So does anybody have, could you include in the report to the full board if and how much future payroll might be affected? Because since these classifications are based on industry standards, I'm sure things will change. And when you're a director, you know, that's a position that may have higher wages in the future, et cetera, et cetera. If there's some way to predict or to guesstimate what the future costs might be of all these position changes, that would be helpful to everybody, I think. I noticed in our financial, let's see, it wasn't a financial report. It was where the accountants come in and review the way our finances work. There was a whole lot of information stuffed in that report. The word isn't coming to me, and Michael, Savannah, I think you have experienced that very same thing. So I need a village to help me with that. What was that report?
It's called the CAFR.
The CAFR. Thank you very much. And
comprehensive annual financial report.
There you go. It takes a village to complete any of my sentences. So what was I getting to? Division as, okay, so we have, it said that our management employees were at least 1/3 of the entire workforce of our district. Since I've been here, there's been a very big expansion of management positions. And obviously the district has worked sort of for many years. And so I'm curious, and I think it would be interesting for the board to hear what board initiatives resulted in which expansions or the expansion of need of management. I mean, for example, we did want to have more staff coming into the district rather than hiring consultants. So there's a reason that the board, a board initiative that caused the expansion of our need for more management. And so I think it would be helpful to include information like that in the report to the full board when presenting this item. And I had a question about the advantage of what we're doing. So if in bringing in-house management, was the management, this is a financial question, was the management billed to capital costs of projects? Is that how we kept track of that? In other words, we divide our budget up into operational and capital and asset improvement. And I was wondering if the management was categorized when we hired Carollo or whatever to do management. Was that under assets, capital costs, or was that under operational costs?
So normally when you bring in those types of consultants, they are under professional services. So I'm not sure, and I don't know that Justin, if you know off the top of your head how it was done previously, but I will say, I want to clarify two things, that the project managers that were approved for us to bring in for the capital program were budgeted under the capital funding as opposed to operational. So, but previously with a project like, or with a consultant like Carollo, depending, it would probably have resided in operational, although it's possible if it was project specific that it was under capital. So we'd have to check and follow up. I also want to just answer one question. We actually have not added managers. We have added one manager, was an operations supervisor in the last several years. We have added positions to the organization, but they were not necessarily positions that were overseeing or supervising staff. We've added the operations supervisor. Some of the positions, and probably the way that the CAFRA classified them perhaps was by title, which is not an accurate reflection of management. For example, you have project managers. They don't manage any staff, they manage projects. We have analysts, they don't manage staff, they're managing projects. So we actually haven't brought in or increased our management level with the exception of the operations supervisor. There was a health and safety manager position that was created, doesn't supervise anyone. So some of that is also titling. So I did want to clarify that for you. And we can get back to you on the question regarding the capital for Carollo or consultants of that. Unless Justin, you have that answer now.
We typically, if it is project-based, as you said, that that would be charged directly to a capital project. So the majority of those professional services and those consultants, we classify it as project management or construction management. They tend to be related to a specific project, and so that those would be charged as part of our capital.
So is there any way, just for my simple mind, to break out the difference between managers? Because manager is what I think of when I hear the word manager, and you were making a distinction between someone who manages a project versus someone who manages people, and that's not clear from the names, the name manager or director. So maybe some clarification on that would be useful to me in the future when I look at changes we're making. It seems to me,
And there are also program managers that may or may not supervise staff. So that's the other title and complication to it. So the org chart that's in the staff report will probably also clarify that for you, because you can see the direct, if they're supervising anyone or not. So we'll address that for you in the report.
but then we're converting supervisors to managers also. So even though we're not hiring anybody new or expanding the budget in any way, we're still making more managers than we had before, which do manage people. So, you know, that, keep it simple for me, folks. Really, it'd be really helpful. Also, let's see, capital costs first. I think that was my last comment. I think thinking about this, we've expanded the district because for many, many, many years, we have not kept up with needed improvements. And we have lots of pipes in the ground that need replacing, but we've also have 1972 technology in our completely in our plants. And we are in the midst of huge amounts of spending and movement going forward. And a lot of that is our initiatives that originated with the board. So it'd be good to know when we expand the number of employees, how that's related directly to what the board has asked the district to do. And yeah, so that's my only comment on that. A good report. Make specific, instead of defending your decisions at the presentation, if you could include those defenses in the report as well ahead of time, that would be very useful in terms of how the board deals with it. Those are my comments, and thank you very much for the work and the presentation.
Thank you, Director Wiener. Staff, do you have anything else to add to his comments? Anything else? Otherwise, I'll ask some of my questions here. And I agree with several of yours, Director Wiener, so I wrote some of them down as well, so I'm not going to go through those. Wanted to just, when will these become effective? Are we looking to make them effective after our board meeting? Will they be effective 7/1? Just where would it start impacting?
So the authorization, so one of the steps that Justin outlined for those positions that are new positions, those the board would be approving those specifications. So that would be effective right away. And then it would just, the classification would be created right away. But of course, the recruiting will take, a few months probably. So it's likely that some positions could be on board before July 1st, some might be after July 1st, depending on recruitment efforts.
Okay, thank you. Looking at, in one of Michael's slides, it had removing engineer 2, and then it had engineer 1 and engineer 3. Are we skipping over 2? Or are...
No, I don't know if maybe we can pull the slide back up so we can figure out which one Director Zepeda is talking about, but we're not making any changes to the engineering classifications at all.
Okay, it might have been just the little pictures that stayed behind. I just looked at engineer 2 and engineer 3 and...
So we have engineers in both the planning and support services as well as in capital projects. And I don't believe we actually have any engineer 2s in the organization currently. We have 1 engineer 1 and we have 2 engineer 3s. We have a class. Yeah, so you have an engineer 3 there and an engineer 1 there, and nothing is happening with those positions from the proposed, the current to the proposed. And then if you go to the next slide, you have capital programs, you have an engineer 3. And if you go to the next slide there, you still have an engineer 3, you're just changing the capital portfolio manager. Just so you're aware, we have a classification, which is engineer 1, 2, 3. And it's a progressive classification. So this engineer, someone who's in this engineer 3 probably used to be an engineer 1. So there's some specific sort of phase gates in order to go from a 1 to a 2 to a 3, and it has to do with education and certification. So depending on what education and certification they have, it will land them in a different 1, 2, or 3 classification. So we're not doing anything to change those.
All right, so is it safe to just look at those as engineers, and then the 1, 2, 3 is based on their education? Because 1 could become 3 at the end of the year.
Correct.
Potentially, right? All right, perfect. I just want to make sure that we weren't skipping an engineer in there.
No.
And is the GIS program manager, based on what you, and I don't understand it very well yet, but based on what you mentioned, it sounds like this person, and I'm paraphrasing here, would help with the, figuring out where our potholes are, the sizes, and some of the infrastructure where it all went to. Once all that's figured out, do we see this position changing in the future with it? Because, once you know where the potholes are, I don't think somebody needs to go back in there. That they should not be moving, hopefully, right?
Yeah, so if I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Where do we see this position in a couple of years?
Yeah, so I don't.
No, go ahead.
If I wasn't clear, this position is tasked with maintaining the system that holds the information, right? So this GIS system is a database of information, and it has to do with where our assets are, but it also has to do with the condition of our assets, the CCTV footage, the legal authority documents that give us the authority to be in a certain place with our infrastructure. So the short of it, we do see this as a long-term ongoing position, because this position will need to maintain this system indefinitely. So if there's a new pipe that's put in, when we do a pipe replacement, we immediately put that information into GIS. Someone needs to put it in there. When CSO is out in the field and they identify that this manhole is incorrectly placed in our GIS system, they send that information back to this person, and they need to add that information into our system. When we get new video footage, someone needs to add that to our system. We have things that come up, like the state has requirements, or these different organizations come in, and we have, for instance, our Riverwatch agreement. There's some information in our Riverwatch agreement that requires us to replace lines that are within 200 feet of a waterway and have a pipe score of 4 or 5. We identify those lines by giving those parameters to this person. They run the report based on the information that they maintain, and they give us a list of pipes that we need to go and replace. So it is definitely a position that will be needed long term. And just to further clarify, the spec that we're developing is for a GIS as well as an asset management professional. What we're looking to recruit for is the GIS portion of that. Once we figure out our internal CMMS system and our asset management system, this spec will allow us to recruit for that person as well.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
And then in regards to bringing this forward to the board meeting, is there a possibility to see the slides, the changes sort of side by side? Because unless you have the PDF in front of you and being able to figure out, you have the 5 positions here, and all of a sudden you've got 4 or 6, trying to figure out which one went away, because they all look kind of the same unless you're remembering which one it was. So I don't know if there's a possibility to kind of show, right now we have A, B, and C, and then it's going to go to D, G, F, and B. Is it just something there? Just so I can hear that question coming up. Oh, I can't see the differences.
Would it be helpful to have on the same, maybe take the org chart and show it and then cross out the positions versus on the same page? That might help. Yeah, okay.
I think that visual would help the directors better see what those would be, because I can see in the past, I can see where they haven't been able to track the changes from slide to slide. So I think that would help us move the meeting along.
We'll put it on one so you can see what's being eliminated versus added.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the annual cost, do those include both salary and benefits?
Yes.
It is? Okay, perfect. Because so we're adding 2 new individuals, and I like what Director Wiener mentioned about trying to figure out management versus non-management, and also the directive of the board, how it's getting us, because we're about to increase our payroll, by over $500,000, and we're only adding 2 individuals, right? And I know there's other changes in there too, but thinking ahead, we're going to later on potentially asking the taxpayers to maybe pay a little more, or we might be restructuring ourselves in a little different. So how do we pay for 2 new roles for over $500,000? And I know that it's 2 people are not getting $500,000 split into 2, right? But just trying to figure out how do we paint that picture. Just backing up what Director Wiener had said, adding maybe a little bit more information on that might just make it easier to see that picture. But overall, I like the direction that this idea has brought forward. I think that looking at the titles, at least for me, I mean, I was looking at like Justin and Michael and going, yeah, manager. I'm like, yeah, you do more than manager. And just psychologically, how you look at those 2 individuals and going, okay, well, who's your boss? Oh, you are the boss. I mean, ultimately, Lisa's the boss, right? But within that department, and so I think those roles and changing that, I think would help our agency as a whole. The other thing that I noticed in there, secretary, and this wasn't part of the recommendation, but I was just looking at secretaries. Are they real secretaries? Because that brings me back to, like, you know, the movies that I was watching in the 70s. It's like, oh, you know, just have my secretary take the message, and, you know, and the typewriter. Yeah, because who knows what a computer was back then. Do we need secretaries, or are they now more administrative assistants? Right? Has that role also changed? So looking at all of the positions would be great to lift everybody up into the positions that they're really out there. And again, I just saw secretaries, and because it was the weekend, so I was watching a movie, and there was the old movies where they had secretaries. But those are my only comments, other than similar to what Director Wiener said. Overall, I think the presentation is really good, and I think that the vision you guys are all providing will help the agency continue to move us forward into this new vision. And as the directors are asking for more, it really shows that you have thought about how you're going to position the agency as we as directors keep throwing things at you. So thank you for getting ready to catch all the ideas that we come up with. And that is all that I have, unless anybody has any other comments or questions, anything to add.
I just wanted to address quickly a couple of things that I wanted to let you know that we actually are taking a look at all of the positions and the titles. So there will be more title changes probably coming. And we sort of look at them as we're continuing to do this overall analysis of the organization. And that's why when we take a look at, we weren't going to change the analyst titles, for example, but we were like, well, let's take a look at some of these things and what makes more sense within the industry, what makes sense for recruiting long-term. Like you said, you know, when you look at the department, the current department managers, they're really more department directors than they are managers. And so we will be continuing to look at that on an ongoing basis for sure. So there may be more title changes down the road. So I did want to just address that. And also in terms of like the fiscal impacts, we will definitely provide more detailed information on that in the presentation. But it's important to remember that, you know, the board did adopt this pretty aggressive strategic plan. And that's as you said, exactly what we're doing is how are we going to deliver these initiatives? And one thing, you know, to keep in mind is that we came from being an organization that did a lot of tasks and had a lot of tasks to do. And we had very little support in terms of who's organizing that work, who's putting the systems and structures in place, who's doing the reporting, who's analyzing information. And if you don't do those things and you only do tasks, then you are not actually managing your infrastructure, your financial resources, your human resources. And that is what led to, I think, a lot of the issues that we're trying to clean up. We weren't making the best financial decisions because you had more task people than you did people taking a look at the, you know, analyzing and making a sound business decision. And so the system and structure we're putting in place is to ensure that we have the right people who can also do that work. It's not just about, like Michael said, people sitting at a desk and not doing anything and directing everyone else. It's really making sure that people are analyzing information and using that information to inform good, sound decision-making. So that's the shift that you see in terms of positions. So anyway, that's sort of the final comment, and we'll make sure that all of that information is laid out clearly in the report that goes to the board along with the presentation. So.
Thank you for that extra comment there. That adds more to the idea. So thank you. Again, anybody else have anything else to add? I try to keep us within the hour, and I think we're just about there. You all are probably hungry. You want to go get some lunch. So Lynette, welcome again. Look forward to working with you. And thank you everyone for your time today.
Thank
We will
you.
see you all in a couple of days at the next board meeting.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.